Well, good morning, my amigos. How you doing? I was asked about arrows and arrow constructions, so hey, let me see if I can show you a couple of arrows that I have and some things I've done in the past. So, take a look at this. I've got a whole bunch of arrows laid out. Alright, so as you can see, there's a whole lot of ways you can make arrowheads. And I'm going to show you a couple of them that I've run across. It's kind of funny, when you go to events and people literally throw away arrows when they get busted or whatever have you. Actually run across some. Of course, I also traded with some people too over the years. It's kind of a fun hobby, and you just kind of run across them. You say, hey, you have a good time. You trade arrows. You put them up as kind of trophies on the wall, which is kind of fun. Like for example, this one from Jill. This is from Moki. So this is one that she actually threw away, but of course she knew I kept it, so that was kind of neat. This is one of Malran's arrows, right here. This next one is one that I've had for a while. I think it doesn't have my name on it, and on the fletching. It's always good to put your name on the fletching, because one, rules, but two, it's easier to find your arrows later. Here's one that I made. We'll talk about him in a minute. This is, I think, one of Quiet's arrows, I believe. One that I made, here is, oh my goodness, I'll have to come back to that one. But this one's actually a 3D printed one. So I want to say it's Measurin over in Iron Mountains made this design. Half of a yard ball like this one, pasted to a bit of foam, and then a 3D printed base. And that's kind of a neat little design right there. This is some Sutra Tech from the... Yeah, I'll remember it in a moment. Anyway, so a dagger here arrow. They're a little squishier in the front, so you can shoot people in the in the face amongst other things. So it's like being hit by a cushion, so it's kind of nice. But he also made a Amtgard arrow type. So if I was to say, I've always kind of liked this modular design. Used a little bit of kite spar, and then did pretty much everything else the same. This is feels like it's about half a yard ball and then a base. So not bad. So there you go. And over there is what it looks like over on the arrow. See, it just kind of slides right on, and what you do is you just use electrical tape to tape it to the shaft. I've yet to use these because I just had enough arrows. So, how do you make them? Well, here's one way I made them, and you can always modify it. Now, I'm noticing as I look at all these designs that we've gone from a full yard ball to like half a yard ball. And honestly, I think half a yard ball would probably be about enough, which is good because yard balls can be kind of fun to come across. So, you just kind of cut them in half and then add them to a base of some type. And how does a base work? Well, for starters, and I like to emphasize this, definitely take the tip off the arrows. And then the first thing you do is you take a washer and you take a long screw that can fit your arrow shaft screw thread, and you make this washer screw thing to, basically what it is, it's the washer itself, and you got the screw and a nut that attaches it. Alright, so you got this little assembly. So a washer, screw, and nut with a little bit of Loctite to hold it together. So or super glue. Super glue, of course, usually crystallizes and will crack later, but some kind of adhesive that will keep the screw and nut firm on each other. And then you take and you screw it into the shaft, and then what you do next is you'll have a little bit of, usually what they use is they grab those little Nerf footballs and they'll cut off the nose, and they'll usually, in this case, they'll just attach it. So they'll attach it to the bottom side of the washer. Then they'll take a little piece of matte foam, camping foam, something along those lines, and they'll attach it to the top of the washer. Then they'll take the yard ball and they'll use what's known as carpet tape, which is very sticky on both sides. So you'll attach the carpet tape to the top of it, yard ball, and then what I did next is I used this packaging tape. It's that strip type of packaging tape, and then you just kind of go around it. So what I wound up doing is I'd go over it, and then wrap around a couple of times around the middle, and come around. And as you can see, I've done it at the bottom, and I come up, loop it over the ball, and then around it, and just basically kind of make this basket design. And you kind of come around again, and around there, and then you kind of come around at some point, attach it to the arrow shaft itself. This, as you can see, it held together pretty well. It's very sturdy, held the ball right in place, so it's not too bad. The only problem I ran into was the arrow broke, so that's why it's disassembled right now. And this is why this type of assembly right here really comes in handy, because arrows do break. Now there's a couple of arrow shafts that people have been using that are a little more sturdy, like, let's go back again to the Measurin arrow. This type of shaft you can practically stomp on, you can really push on it, and it springs back into shape. So that is a special type of carbon fiber which is really resilient. That's something to think about. So again, summarize the big thing that people have been using: yard balls, Nerf balls, camp foam, and then ways to attach it have been like the packaging tape and carpet tape to kind of assemble the middle pieces. So it's not bad. And of course, as you can see here in this case, we used electrical tape in lieu of the packaging tape. But for the most part, as you can see on the quiet arrow, I let my dog play with this one a little bit. Sorry, quiet. Yeah, that's kind of fun. All right, so that is pretty much it. The only other thing to mention is the type of feathers that you got at the bottom. The fletchings. They varied over time. By and large, here's how it works. It basically flies, Amtgard arrows pretty much fly head first for short distances, relatively short distances. Nothing like a actual arrow. So these things pretty much carry the weight. The airflow pretty much flies past these guys, and they fly basically accurate with whatever chaotic wobble they usually have as arrows. And that's why, over time, this type of fletching, this is not the actual type of fletching they use these days, but it's very similar. These kind of foofy feathers, or fletchings. Airflow comes back this way, and these actually offer some guidance because they actually are outside of the airflow at that point. This type right here is an aluminum arrow, and I haven't used this one in quite a while, but I'd say these were used about 2001, that time frame. But there are now graphite arrows that also have this type of fletching. The reason why, let's talk about two other types of arrows real quick. Wooden arrows, at one time we used to kind of wrap in tape, and they've done away with that. There's just so many graphite arrows now, and they're worth it. They really are. They're very much worth it. Aluminum arrows are out there, and I believe you can still use them. I just highly recommend against it. And the reason why is they fly fine, and the price is fine, but if they get stepped on once, they're bent. And there's really no way to bend it back all the way. Well, maybe there is. Maybe you've got some kind of high caliber machinery that can very, very gently bend it back to shape, and you have all the equipment to bend it back. I've never had any luck, is my point. I've tried to bend it back, and it's still bent and it still flies crooked. So they're generally pretty well boned after that. So anyway, there you go. You got the instructions now. And that is pretty much all I can think of at this time. Like I say, I can't stress it enough. Make sure to take the actual arrow tip off the arrows. And, you know, one thing you can do, arrow tips, generally, you know, you got the type that have the screw on to most of the time, but you can get by with other types, just as long as either you've got your arrow tip attached to it either by a screw, or you're going with this method where you've slid it on like so, or, you know, some way of firmly attaching it so that the head doesn't move. You know, it's nice and firm. So that's something else to keep in mind. There are options there too, and of course price can vary a little bit on whether or not you got the screw in front or not, and like I say, ways to work with that. So anyway, with that, happy hunting, and there are other arrow tutorials out on the internet. One other types you can look for if you're looking for the most modern type. Yeah, you might want to check out, say, Aden or Fenton. They generally have the arrows that they and Ice use, and there's I think a few others that have kind of picked up on it. My arrows are accurate to a little erratic, and that actually helps sometimes. You know, accuracy is great, but it's kind of fun having people try to dodge my arrows, and you know, when they step out of the way, they wind up dodging into the arrows because the arrows change slight flight. And that's just really because of, once again, you know, the fletchings. The fletchings make the difference on that last bit of accuracy. So anyway, with that, have a great morning, or whatever time zone it is, and we'll talk later.